What's up, grinders? Today we're going to review how to actually learn a language the Refold Method Explained. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've never heard of Refold before, because that would just be lying. I've bumped into plenty of people who are using this method. I've seen videos about this method online before, I've read discussions, and I even jumped in their Discord once long ago before I promptly left. So why am I reviewing this video then? Because one of you guys requested that I do so. That's what I do a lot on this channel. Now, before we begin, I guess I'll say a couple of things. If you want me to review a video, leave a comment below. And additionally, we now have our own Discord. So go check out that link. It'll be in the pinned comment. We just discuss languages, practice languages, and meme away. That is basically the whole purpose of my Discord. It's just language-related stuff. Let's begin.
The success rate of language learners around the world is abysmal. Nearly everybody studies a second language at some point, but the number of people that speak that language well is shockingly low. And this isn't their fault, or yours if it's happened to you either. The language learning industry is backwards and confusing and focuses on the wrong things. It's not the individual learner's fault.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with that statement. At the end of the day, if you truly want to learn the language, what was the first thing everyone did when they wanted to learn a language? Before they even typed into Google how to learn X, they typed, how long will X take to learn? I remember I typed that for like even Esperanto back in the day. So I'm pretty sure everyone types this as either their first thing or their second thing. And if you did, what you're going to be hit with is an estimate. Usually from, one of the American Defense Institutes or something like that, where it will say, for X language, you're going to need to probably spend 2,000 plus hours. So every learner knows that this is going to take a long time. And if you allow apps to dupe you or some stupid polyglot online to say, oh, you can learn it in 3 months with my magical method, then you're basically duping yourself. You know that this is a trick. There's like snake oil salesmen everywhere. So realistically, then, it is on you. You need to make that commitment knowing that it's going to take that amount of hours and that you're going to have to put in the hard work. If you said the same thing about fitness, where you said, oh, it's not the person who's working out, it's their fault. It's not their fault, it's the tools they're using. Everyone would kind of laugh at you because, well, we know it's not the tools. The tools work. People have used these tools for like generations. It's down to you in the end to put in the hard work and actually pump those muscles. There's a reason I'm not ripped at the moment. It's because I know that this is going to take an insane amount of time and I don't have that time to commit. So I prefer people to take responsibility, understand what they're getting into before they actually get into it, rather than sitting here going, I'm glad you agree with me. It's not my fault, because you're going to be putting in a lot of hard work.
Our mission is to fix that. The Refold method is focused on learner success and not on gimmicks like speed. We don't claim that it's going to be a super easy and cushy ride in just 15 minutes per day, because it's not. Language learning is hard, but we'll be there with you every step of the way to make
Okay, so I'm glad he said that at least.
sure that you're not lost. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to lay out the entire process for learning any language from zero.
That hyperbolic statement there, any language. Obviously, this is not going to focus on like sign languages or anything like that. I'm assuming this is just modern spoken languages, but I need to say this because otherwise someone will say it in the comments.
Gonna have to gloss over a lot of details, so make sure you check the links in the description for more information. And subscribe while you're down there. Start the clock. There are two primary problems with language learning as it exists today, and they're both important to understand. The traditional method of learning that you might find in schools is what we call the grammar translation method, and it's just not effective. The idea is that by learning a bunch of vocab and grammar in the language, you can translate from English into the target language.
Well, it's not effective for the majority of people, although I have met some people who thrive on just like learning grammar and using this method to learn a language. It's totally not for me, but for some people it is. But obviously if you're here watching a video about the Refold method, this is not the method for you, grammar translation being the one I'm talking about.
This allows you to make some very fast progress. You can start saying things on the very first day. But the problem is that it's just very mentally taxing, slow, and leads to very unnatural language.
Okay, I'm going to say right now, no matter what method you use, okay, at the start, you will be sounding unnatural and you will be unclear and you will use weird English phrases. It's almost unavoidable. Yes, certain parts that you've learned well, you'll probably speak quite well, but no matter what, until you get to like a high upper intermediate, you're probably going to have a lot of influence from your native language and it's going to mess up your patterns. There's no way around that.
Other languages aren't just English, but pronounced differently and with a different word order.
I do want to add one more thing to that. The people who follow, like, say, Dreaming Spanish, they'll say, yeah, no, that's not true, because when you finally speak after, like, 1,500 hours, you've got these great, like, structures and stuff. Well, that's because you've sat there for 1,500 hours just absorbing. So naturally, you've actually learnt a lot of these patterns. But even for those people, they will still make that mistake. And again, Spanish is a closely related language to English, so you can get away with a lot.
They're completely different and you have to retrain how to think. Plus, trying to memorize vocabulary lists isn't going to work. Most natives know between 20 and 30,000 different words, and each of those words usually have 2 or more definitions, sometimes up to 30, depending on the context.
Yeah, don't bother trying to memorize lists, except in very specific circumstances. Let's say you're very high level already, you understand the language, if it conjugates and all this type of stuff. Then you can learn lists for like specific technical terms or items or whatever, but you need to be at a stage where you obviously already understand the language.
Country or the specific social situation.
But don't do it for verbs. Never learn lists of verbs, because verbs are always a mess.
Some words have super strong cultural context or are part of idioms or other multi-word phrases. There's just too much to try to memorize. And the same goes for grammar. Even if you pass your high school Spanish classes and can conjugate all the charts perfectly, that's not really going to help you understand natives when they're using it at full speed to express their thoughts and ideas. Natives don't follow what's in the textbook. They're following what they know and going with the flow. When people dream of fluency in a second language, it usually doesn't involve mental calculations and lots of conjugation charts. They imagine being able to speak easily and fluently and confidently to express their ideas without...
Okay, so this is a very anti-grammar approach. I am not anti-grammar, but I am also not pro-grammar. The way I see grammar is, it's basically a stepping stone at the very beginning of your journey to get the basic understanding of the entire language. It's the 80-20% rule, okay? So what you do is you take the most basics of the grammar, you learn it, and you learn the most basics because that's going to cover like 80% of the language. And then you've got all these like little random grammar rules that cover off all the other stuff. Don't bother about that stuff. You just learn that 80%, which you will generally find in most like beginner language textbooks for the language. Like you're going to learn the most basic patterns. You take those, you then create basically templates around them and you learn them. And that will save you a ton of time than trying to learn these in context. Now, all those very specific edge case like grammar rules and stuff, you learn all those in context. Don't bother memorizing them. So this whole I am either for grammar or I'm against grammar, it doesn't make sense. Use it for where it's best, for getting that that initial burst, that initial kick up the butt to move forward.
Really thinking about it. This is what we call language instinct, and this is what the Refold method is focused on. We want you to be able to use the language without conscious thought, like you're doing now. I'm saying words and they're entering your mind as meaning. There's no lag time. The second problem is how people tend to approach language learning. It's a long-term goal and people don't really realize that. This is made worse by polyglot YouTube and Duolingo marketing, which makes it seem like it'll be an easy process with a little bit of focus and some minor effort. But
yeah, well, obviously this is true. There's a lot of false marketing, there's bullshit polyglots online and all this type of stuff. But this is the same for everything out there. Like there's a course that will say, learn C++ in 10 days or like 60 minutes or some stupid stuff like that, There is courses for all this stuff. And if you've lived on this earth for more than 10 minutes and you have the ability to control your own finances, you've learned quite quickly that most of this is bullcrap. So I feel like even the average man realizes that learning a language is going to take a lot of time.
That's just not the case. Language learning is something that takes a long time and dedication. Language learning marketing takes advantage of this misconception.
And the funny thing is, I'm not disagreeing with him in most parts here, but I just hate that people rely on saying, oh, it's the course's fault or these polyglots' faults. No, that's just offloading, the responsibility.
And makes it sound as easy as going on a Sunday picnic. Play our little mobile game and you'll be fluent in no time, I promise. But even when people do realize how big learning a language actually is, most people haven't been taught how to approach a problem of that size. As a society, we place a lot of emphasis on motivation. It's this magic tool that'll help you if you're not getting things done. You're just not motivated. But
yeah, well, this is where what I talk about always comes into play, and that's the grind. So motivation's what gets you started, it's the little kick, and it's the thing that just randomly pops up along the way. But what actually makes progress with a language or any skill at all is that you have to do something with it every single day. You have to slowly improve. It's the same with fitness. You can't just go to the gym every day, do 5 push-ups, leave, and expect to make progress. You're not going to make progress. You need to slowly improve upon what you've done. It's the same with languages, the same with going to the gym, it's the same with bloody learning a language, it's the same with everything.
The reality is that motivation is weak and fleeting. It will fade. It's not going to last for years or even months. How many times have you had motivation for something for a couple hours and then it's just gone? I know that I've been bit by the motivation bug a whole bunch of times, pretty much weekly.
And this is also why I don't stick to one specific method, or I don't always recommend that you must do method A, is because when you lose motivation, usually that's the result of you're getting sick of doing what you've been doing up until this point. So you need to spice it up. And a great way to spice it up is just to try a different method of learning. Like if you've been doing Anki for weeks now and it's driving you up the wall and you want to quit. No, quit Anki. Go do something else. Like, you need to spice things up. That's the whole point. You can't just sit there doing the same thing over and over, which is where a lot of these language methods fail, because they recommend you do the same thing over and over and over.
So a huge part of the Refold method is focusing on consistency and dedication and helping you make progress even when you're not motivated. The way we at Refold approach learning a language may seem a little bit weird or backwards at first, but it's because we're avoiding those two big problems. Now, let's get back to
I actually haven't seen anything weird or backwards so far.
that language instinct thing. How the hell do you build that? I just listed a whole bunch of reasons why it's a ginormous thing that should sound really scary. I actually have good news for you. Our brains are really, really good at that. Our brains are pattern matching machines.
Exactly.
We're really good at subconsciously recognizing patterns and learning them. It's the reason you're so easily able to recognize faces and voices that you've seen or heard before. And why
For me, funnily enough, I am great at recognizing faces, but I cannot recognize names to save my life. Even people I've known for years. I have to create stupid stories based on their facial features to remember their names. I have no idea why it's like that, but I just am.
why some chess grandmasters can recognize games from 50 years ago in less than a second.
24th game from Seville, obviously.
All we
Yeah, because he's just doing pattern analysis here. He's basically looking at it. He's seen this pattern so many times before.
need is good exposure to those patterns. Enough time and repetition, and we will learn them subconsciously without really trying.
100% on point so far.
But you can't just douse yourself in the language and hope that you're going to learn. We need a little bit
You just took a shot at the pure comprehensible input crowd. The type just sits and listens.
more than that. We need what's called optimal input. Input, by the way, is what we call language entering your brain, which is usually by listening or reading. The first thing is that your optimal input needs to be interesting. You kind of need to care about the language a little bit in order to learn anything. The second thing is that it needs to be comfortable. You need to not hate the process or the sound or the way that you're getting that input. Some of the reasons that
Again, this is all very generic advice and it applies to pretty much learning anything. You need to be interested in what you're learning and you need to be comfortable with the current level within it, otherwise you're not going to maintain that interest.
classroom learning is so ineffective is that it's not interesting and can be pretty uncomfortable. And the third thing for optimal input is that it needs to be understandable. If
And understandable just feeds into interesting.
you're not able to understand anything, you're not learning anything. But it only needs to be a little bit understandable. At the beginning, you're not going to understand much. Bits and pieces, maybe just
Okay, so looking at this graph, they've got 2,000 hours down there. For Chinese, it's definitely more than 2,000. I'm thinking like 3,000 plus hours because I am at, you know what, I'm going to let this scroll through and hopefully it does to the point where I'm at.
individual words. The main ideas, the plot, you're still probably going to be missing that. But then eventually, you'll be able to pick up on whole sentences and maybe ideas in the topic of
Yeah, that's basically where I am. So I'm at the general plot stage. Now, he's saying that's around 1,000 hours in, you'll get the general plot. Yeah, that seems accurate so far.
a conversation, but you might still struggle with bigger
Wait, actually, no, that for them was more like... Oh, because this is like a different type of graph, sorry. That actually was saying probably around 600 hours you'd be... No, that's not accurate.
ideas. Eventually, you'll be following along
Realistically, general plot, you're looking around 1,000 hours for Chinese.
with the whole plot and watching entire TV series in your new language. But some nuances might still be difficult. And then eventually, you'll understand everything. A lot like a native speaker would. Nuances and everything. It can be really frustrating to get started because you know so little, but with some perseverance and dedication, you'll be understanding in no time. Something a little counterintuitive is that speaking is not something you need to build your language instinct. It can refine your instinct, but only what's already there. So we recommend avoiding speaking to
Okay, I kind of agree that, like, it doesn't... Obviously, you don't learn specifically from speaking, but he did say it refines your language input. In fact, I think it fortifies it. So you can listen to a ton of stuff and you'll like hear it, you'll understand it, but then when it comes time to say it, if you haven't actually practiced it, then it's not going to come out because you need to basically train your mouth muscles, like the memory within them, for this specific word. Listening is different to speaking. It's two totally different skills.
early because it's not really that useful and can be super stressful, which is a bad thing because we want your learning to be comfortable.
Okay, I totally disagree with that. Speaking for me is not stressful at all, so this is obviously a subjective opinion. If he means speaking as engaging in actual conversations with like people on the street, well then I would find both listening and speaking to both be equally stressful on the street if like I'm learning this language type of thing.
Imagine that you've never heard music.
So speaking can actually be done quite easily. You can just literally stand in your room and just talk with yourself. And that's a very easy thing to do because you can constantly check and go back and try again. While listening, if you're just listening to something that's running onwards, you're going to miss a lot and you might have to keep jumping backwards and it can become quite tiring. And there's often times where you won't understand enough of it that it can actually drive you insane.
Music before in your life. You've never heard a single song or anything. And then I ask you to learn to play the piano. You can't just sit down at the piano and start playing things and hope to learn. You don't even know what music is or sounds like or what the purpose is. You can't start learning to play
So I can't really talk about the music analogy because, for example, I never learned a musical instrument. However, I can talk about tones. So for example, with Chinese, I learned how to pronounce the tones long before I was able to actually hear them in all contexts. Because learning to pronounce them is very easy in one way, because you can draw out both the sound of the tones and the pronunciation of them and get them down quite pat. But then when they're actually in rapid, like natural speech, they're very difficult to hear. So, for example, in that case, speaking, you can get ahead a lot faster than you can with listening.
Play something until you know what it's supposed to sound like, what good or bad music is, what you like and don't like. So you would start by listening to a lot of music and starting to figure out what it is, what the basic rules are, and how it sounds. What the
Now, I'm not against him and saying like you should be doing listening from the start. I agree, you should be doing a lot of listening. But I also don't think you should be delaying your speaking for a very long time. As soon as you have the phonology of the language down pat and you know that you can pronounce it correctly, then start learning to speak, because what will happen is you will fortify everything that you're listening to.
vibe is. Only then can you start to learn to play the instrument. The same goes for speaking a language. If you start saying sentences with
This would be akin to just listening to instruments, listening to them, listening to them, listening to them, but never actually using your hands to play them. It doesn't make sense. So you're going to listen for a little bit, but you're going to start actually playing as fast as possible. Otherwise, you're not going to make progress. Like, I've listened to thousands and thousands of hours of the piano, but I can't play the piano.
without really knowing what they mean or how they should sound, it's just not going to be that useful and you won't learn much. Plus, you won't know how a conversation flows or what somebody says when they respond to you. Starting with understanding is a lot easier and leads to deeper fluency.
I feel like that was a bit of a hyperbolic statement there, that it leads to deeper fluency. I don't agree with that. It leads to you being able to understand stuff quicker and be able to, listen to it. But it doesn't mean you're going to be fluent. You're not going to get good at speaking until you actually do speaking.
Okay, that's enough background. Let's look at the Refold method of language learning. I have things laid out into phases, but since everyone is different, learning a different language and starting at a different point in the process, you're going to have to make some modifications for yourself. And so we leave these open to adding your own things or changing or whatever it might be. So keep it in mind. The end goal assumption is that you want to be fluent in the language and be able to communicate with native speakers at full speed without thinking.
Okay, that's a fine end goal, I guess, but I recommend that you make a more specific end goal, because then you can work towards that quicker and get to do what you enjoy quicker. So if your end goal, for me example, is to make a YouTube channel where I talk about Chinese, but specifically do Let's Plays in Chinese, well then clearly the main content I'm going to be consuming is video games in Chinese, and that will help me get to my end goal faster. I will, by the fact that I'm watching lots of video games, start to learn more and more of the general language outside of that. But why would I start learning about, politics if I have no interest in that and I'm not going to be using that soon? So pick a very specific goal, work towards that, and then you can expand out from that.
Generally, being able to live your life in the language if you wanted to. I'm also going to put some very rough estimates of hours onto the screen.
Okay, let me have a look at this. So I'm guessing different languages would be Chinese, because this looks like it matches the general tables that you see about languages, for example, Dutch being similar and Chinese and Japanese being in different categories. What are they saying? They're saying you need 3,600 hours total to get to level 6. I don't know what level 6 is. I'm guessing that means fluency. But what is 7 then? I'm not sure.
Green, yellow, and red. These correspond to, more or less, how long it'll take for you to get to each of these phases, depending on what your target language is. Green languages have a lot of similarities with your native one, red languages are very, very different, and the yellow ones are pretty much everything else. Like I said, the phases are named after their primary focus, but you're going to be doing other things during them. I have to skip over some information because I only have not much time left. There's more information in the description if you need. In phase 1, your goal is to learn the fundamentals of the language, so basic vocabulary.
Okay, so learning new words, easy immersion, super easy readers, beginner crosstalk. Yeah, all of that's fine. I don't really bother with crosstalk, and I feel like it'd probably be pointless at this stage in the language, but, well, maybe not pointless if you can get it cheap, but it'd be costly unless you know people who actually speak the language. But yeah, all of that seems fine.
Vocabulary and patterns. You're trying to take it from gibberish into gibberish that's kind of familiar. You're going to be spending lots of time with audio and text together to build up your understanding of the language. In phase 2, you're trying to build up your slow understanding of the language. This means that you can work your way through a conversation.
So, learning new words, sentence mining, easy reading, TV shows, YouTube, crosstalk. Well, I'd recommend that you start with the YouTube and sentence mining literally from the beginning while you're learning that grammar. In fact, as you're learning those grammatical structures, start watching some videos, getting some input, looking for those structures and taking those and using them. I wouldn't really wait until, how far are they into this phase? So this phase is like 600 hours in. 600 hours, that seems a long time to wait. No, I'd be doing that way sooner. Remember, I'm at like 1,000 hours now and I'm already like low-level conversational and Chinese type of thing.
conversation between new native speakers, one line at a time, and generally understand with the help of tools and maybe looking up some words. Again, you'll be spending lots of time with text and audio to build up your comprehension. This is the longest stage, and you can be here for what feels like forever, but it does end. Then,
So wait, did I misread that? No, I think I got that right.
in phase 3, we'll be focusing on turning that slower comprehension into fast comprehension, or
So intense listening, YouTube, crosstalk, continuing past, chorusing, easy podcast trends. In fact, I haven't actually seen any talking yet. How many hours are we in? So this phase ends with 2,000 hours. This phase lasts about 800. So, wait, this is 2,000 hours. How long is it? 8? So that means you're not doing any form of talking? Because chorusing is not really speaking. Chorusing is basically just listen and repeat. It's what I do with Anki. But, like, you're not doing that until... What is that? That's like 1,300 hours in. That's insane. That means... if I was following this method, I wouldn't have even started chorusing until now. Or listen and repeating drills. I do not recommend that at all. In fact, I recommend you start listening and repeating as soon as you can actually pronounce the language, because that way you're going to start training up your mouth muscles and it's going to reinforce what you're hearing as well. Why would you wait this long? That seems like a really bad idea, especially if you're chorusing, because chorusing or listen and repeating drills assumes that you're copying good, real content. So that doesn't make sense to me.
listening. You'll be spending a lot of time with just audio to train your ear and hear things in real time. This phase also takes a big chunk of time, but it's when the language can be effortlessly fun, meaning you don't need to spend a ton of brain juice in order to understand and have fun. Then in stage 4, you'll be focusing on speaking comfort, which may sound a little bit.
So what do we got? So this is now phase finishes with 2,400 hours. It's 400, so you're at 2,000 hours, speaking comfort, tutoring sessions, reading aloud, voice messaging, monologuing, chorusing. So you're literally only starting to speak, if this was Chinese, at 2,000 hours. No, that is really bad. That is a massive waste of your time. Monologuing, I've literally written a 5-minute script last week in Mandarin Chinese. So I've written it, I've had it checked, I've got it, like all the errors fixed in it, and I'm now memorizing it because I'm planning to launch my Chinese YouTube channel pretty soon. So, and I'm doing that at just around 1,000 hours, and they're recommending this at like 2,000 hours for Mandarin Chinese. I feel like that's a massive waste of time.
Odd, but when you start speaking, you'll be able to hear all of your mistakes, which is going to be super awkward, but you'll be making super fast progress and get over
I can generally hear my mistakes at 1,000 hours, but you can easily get around this by simply monologuing with real content.
this pretty quickly. And when you talk to native speakers, they'll be super impressed and say things like, wow, this is only your 3rd conversation ever? You must be like a genius or something.
Yeah, but I could say that and just lie as well.
And as a reminder, you will be doing other things during this section, not just speaking. You'll also be reading and listening and trying some writing activities as well. But your primary focus...
That's good. Although none of these stages so far have spoken about the fact, for example, with Chinese, you're actually going to have to learn a script.
Focuses on speaking comfort. You'll be speaking with yourself and natives if you can, and focusing on being comfortable and not worrying about your mistakes. Because in phase 5, you'll be focusing on all those mistakes that you made in phase 4. Now,
so tutoring, long-form writing, corrected writing, formal grammar study. So they're doing grammar now. So I recommend you do basic grammar at the start and then also do more grammar when you hit a very high level in order to become more creative with the language. So here, this is fine, I guess, based on, everything that's happened so far.
now that you don't feel totally ridiculous, you can dive in and start to focus on the things that you can improve in the language. We primarily do this through writing and analysis of the mistakes that you make so that you don't keep making them into the future. And then phase 6 is a lot about becoming a user of the language. You're just trying...
Okay, so far what I feel about this whole thing is that there's an over-complexity with the phases here. This does not need to be this complex. Maybe this helps people who don't have a more holistic understanding of language learning, and I guess I get that. My big gripe is that they've delayed any form of speaking for a very long time. And in fact, the only speaking that you're doing at 2,000 mark, if this was Mandarin Chinese, is that you're chorusing or listening and repeating. So you should be doing that way back, way back. There's no good reason to delay it that long. And the only reason I could see from this video for delaying it that long is so that you can hear your own mistakes. Well, if you're getting feedback from others and you're listening and repeating based on real materials and you have the phonology of the language down pat, you're generally going to be pretty good by this stage. And any mistakes you make, you can kind of correct later on anyway.
Trying to solidify all of the things that you've learned and expand your knowledge. You'll be exploring new topics, talking to new people, and generally just being comfortable with the language. And that's it. Congratulations. You've become a fluent speaker of the language. Now you're on your own to continue exploring, understanding, and deepening your own fluency. To get here, though, you can't rely on motivation. If that's your whole plan, you are going to fail, which is why we like to focus on consistency over intensity. It may be a bit weird, but going from nothing to something is actually quite hard, but going from something to a lot more is not too bad at all.
I guess he's talking about, actually starting with motivation, because you'll have those things where you're like, I want to do this, but I know it's going to take a lot, so I won't start it yet. I won't start. It's like fitness. I haven't started yet, but once I actually start, then I can just get the ball rolling type of thing. But basically, it just comes down to grinding. You just got to make sure that you've set some type of commitment to do it every day. In fact, that's why I do these videos, because it's a form of commitment. By doing these videos and telling you guys how to learn a language, I can't then just go sit down and not do it myself, because what kind of hypocrite would I be if I'm making videos telling you how to do it and I'm not doing it myself? So these videos are a form of motivation for me. They're also a form of reminding me to do my daily grind, because now after this, I've got to go do my Chinese because I'm making a video about this.
So
Start small. We recommend sticking to just 2 simple learning activities.
some basic vocab learning and immersing in whatever you can that's easy and understandable. You can build up from there, but if you dive in heads first, all guns blazing, you're probably going to burn out. And we're here to help. Make sure to join the Refold Discord server to chat with other learners and people doing the same thing as you. Or, if you're somebody that likes things laid out day by day so you don't really have to think, check out the Refold course. We made a
Also got my Discord in the comments. Come check it out.
30-day course that puts all the information that you need into bite-sized chunks day by day, and we give you specific homework to make progress in the language that you're learning. Link below. All right, before I wrap up
I was just about to call the video, but he said before we wrap up, so now I've got to listen.
this video, there are a few more things that I want to say. First, starting with understanding does work. There are thousands of learners in our communities that can tell you firsthand. And it is
Yeah, well, obviously starting with listening will help because it takes you a while to learn the phonology. So it just literally makes sense to start with listening, and it will also help you reinforce what you've learned about the phonology. So that makes complete sense.
this video has felt really fast to you, check out the description for a free PDF download of the
Oh my god, my neighbor's dog is going off. I am going to murder that thing one day.
6 secrets of language learning. It'll clear up a lot of things in more detail. Another thing that I want to say is that you should definitely connect with other learners and natives if you can. We're going through a bit of a loneliness epidemic in the world right now, and language learning is a fantastic way to make friends, whether in person or online, and they can help keep you motivated for the long term. And lastly,
If you're lonely, don't talk to me. I don't want your loneliness to rub off on me. I'm a very happy person. I don't need that type of upsetting life. I'm just joking, guys. Come join the Discord. And that's pretty much it for the end of the video. So if you guys like this video, leave a comment below, and I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, well, I'm going to make you listen to my accent for 2,000 hours before I allow you. I give you the permission, the exclusive privilege of speaking like an Australian.